Ambassador Zexathara adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus as she entered the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Empire. The massive hall stretched for kilometers, its walls lined with representatives from thousands of worlds. Each species sat in their designated atmospheric zones, from the methane-breathing Korthans to the silicon-based Vextari. The air hummed with translation matrices working overtime to convert the babel of alien languages into comprehensible communication. Today marked the 847th Galactic Standard Year since the Empire's founding, and Zexathara carried news that would shake the very foundations of their civilization. Honored Council, her voice resonated through the bioacoustic amplifiers, reaching every corner of the chamber. I bring urgent intelligence from the Outer Rim territories. We have discovered a new world. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. New worlds were always cause for celebration in the Empire. Fresh resources, new populations to integrate, expanded territory to strengthen their dominion over the galaxy. High Chancellor Mordak, a towering insectoid from the core worlds, leaned forward on his ceremonial perch. His compound eyes gleamed with interest. Excellent news, Ambassador. Which fleet shall we dispatch for initial contact and integration protocols? Zexathara's tentacles writhed with barely concealed anxiety. In her 4 centuries of diplomatic service, she had never been the bearer of such disturbing information. Honored Chancellor, I must advise against any contact whatsoever with this world. My reconnaissance team has designated it as a Class Omega threat. We recommend immediate implementation of a permanent quarantine zone. The chamber erupted in shocked chitters, roars, and harmonic frequencies. A Class Omega designation had never been issued in the Empire's history. Even the most dangerous predator worlds rated only Class Alpha threats. Chancellor Mordak's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Impossible. Our military might spans 10,000 worlds. We have conquered gas giants inhabited by creatures the size of moons. We have tamed energy beings that feed on stellar cores. What primitive backwater could possibly warrant such a classification? Zexathara activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. A blue-green marble appeared, spinning slowly in the projection field. Continents swirled with cloud formations, oceans sparkled with reflected sunlight. The inhabitants call their world Earth, third planet from a yellow star in what they term the Milky Way galaxy's outer arm. At first glance, it appears to be a standard Class M world with oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, liquid water, and carbon-based life. Then what could possibly, began Councillor Veltar from the aquatic delegation. The dominant species calls itself humanity, Zexathara continued, her voice growing darker. Our initial scans suggested a primitive civilization. No faster-than-light travel, limited space exploration, fragmented political systems. We estimated they were perhaps 2 to 3 centuries from achieving interstellar capability. She paused, allowing the image to shift to show cities, teeming with bipedal creatures going about their daily lives. Standard protocol suggested we observe for a full cycle before making contact. What we discovered defies every model of civilization development we possess. The hologram changed to display a human soldier in camouflage, crouched in what appeared to be a jungle environment. The figure moved with predatory grace, eyes constantly scanning for threats. Humans are persistence hunters, Zexathara explained. Their entire evolutionary history shaped them into the most efficient pursuit predators their world has ever produced. They can run for days without stopping, tracking prey across vast distances until their target literally dies from exhaustion. Nervous shifting rippled through the aquatic section. Many species in the Empire were descended from prey animals, and the concept of persistence hunting triggered deep genetic memories. Furthermore, the ambassador continued, they have never known a single planetary government. Their entire history is warfare. Not occasional conflicts over resources or territory, but constant, unending warfare spanning millennia. The hologram shifted to display ancient battlefields, medieval sieges, industrial-age trenches, and modern urban combat. Bodies littered the ground in every image. In their recorded history spanning roughly 5,000 years, there have been fewer than 300 years of complete peace on their world. They fight over resources, ideology, religion, territory, honor, and sometimes simply because they enjoy combat. Chancellor Mordak's exoskeleton rattled with nervous energy. Barbaric, but hardly unusual. The Korathan clans were similarly warlike before integration. Superior technology and overwhelming force typically resolve such. Honored Chancellor, Zexathera interrupted, a breach of protocol that sent shocked ripples through the assembly. You misunderstand. They do not simply fight. They excel at it beyond any rational measure. The display changed to show a human aircraft, sleek and deadly, streaking through Earth's atmosphere. They have weaponized flight barely 1 century after achieving powered aviation. They have created explosives capable of sterilizing entire continents. They have developed chemical weapons so horrific they frequently ban their own creations, then immediately begin developing worse alternatives. Images flashed by in rapid succession, tanks crushing through fortifications, submarines lurking in ocean depths, satellites bristling with weapons platforms. But technology alone does not make them dangerous. The Zephyrian Empire possessed similar capabilities when we integrated them. What makes humans unique is their tactical adaptability and psychological resilience. The hologram displayed a group of human soldiers, faces streaked with mud and exhaustion, yet still advancing toward an enemy position. They fight in every environment their world offers, frozen wastelands where the air itself crystallizes, jungles so dense that midday resembles night, deserts that reach temperatures sufficient to melt copper, ocean depths that would crush most species' exoskeletons. They not only survive in these conditions, they thrive in them. Counselor Ithmok from the Desert Worlds leaned forward. Impressive environmental adaptation, certainly. But they worship death in battle, Zexathara cut him off. Multiple human cultures consider dying in combat the highest possible honor. They have myths and religions that promise eternal paradise for those who fall fighting their enemies. They deliberately seek out the most dangerous conflicts to prove their worth. The chamber fell silent. Most Galactic Empire species valued survival above all else. The concept of actively seeking death was alien and terrifying. "Show them the footage from the observation post incident," whispered Dr. Velthun, Zexthara's chief researcher. Zexthara's tentacles coiled with reluctance. 3 days ago, our stealth observation post in their system experienced a critical malfunction. A power coupling failure created an energy signature visible from Earth's surface for approximately 47 seconds. The holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be a metallic structure partially hidden among asteroids. Within 6 hours, the humans had launched what they called an emergency response mission. Keep in mind, honored counselors, that they have never achieved faster-than-light travel. They used chemical rockets to reach our position, a journey that should have taken them several months with their primitive technology. "How did they manage such a feat?" asked Chancellor Mordak. "They didn't care about return trips." The human crew accepted what they termed a one-way mission. 4 individuals volunteered to die in space on the possibility that they might encounter whatever had caused the energy signature. The display showed a crude but functional human spacecraft, clearly cobbled together from existing technology, with modifications that prioritized speed over safety. They reached our position in 18 days. 18 days. Honored counselors. Our own projections suggested such a journey was impossible with their technology level. What happened when they arrived? The question came from the crystalline delegate of Xerion Prime. Zexathara's form darkened to a deep purple. indicating extreme distress among her species. They didn't attempt to communicate. They didn't try to understand our technology. The moment they confirmed our observation post was artificial in origin, they activated what they called a nuclear device and deliberately destroyed themselves along with half our equipment. Stunned silence filled the chamber. The concept of suicide attacks was not unknown in the galaxy, but typically occurred only when a species faced extinction or absolute defeat. They destroyed themselves simply to deny us the advantage of remaining hidden? Chancellor Mordak's voice carried a note of disbelief. Worse, Zexathera replied. Analysis of their communications during the mission reveals they were excited about the discovery. They viewed potential contact with alien intelligence as the greatest moment in their species' history. Yet the moment they confirmed we were observing them without permission, they chose death over allowing us to continue. She manipulated the hologram to display the final moments of the human spacecraft, the brief flare of nuclear fire consuming both ship and observation post. The surviving humans on Earth called them heroes, not tragic casualties or misguided zealots. Heroes. They have already begun preparing additional missions to investigate the debris field. Dr. Velthun stepped forward, his aquatic form shimmering in the chamber's varied lighting. Honored Council, our behavioral analysis suggests several disturbing conclusions about human psychology. They possess a concept they call mutually assured destruction. When faced with an enemy they cannot defeat, they will ensure that enemy cannot survive their victory. The holographic display shifted to show images of human military installations, missile silos, and submarine bases. Every major human nation maintains weapons capable of rendering their own world uninhabitable. They have created a planetary suicide system and live with it constantly active. Any attempt at conquest would result in the complete destruction of the world we sought to claim. Furthermore, Zexathera added, their response to existential threats appears to be innovation acceleration. Historical data shows that their greatest technological leaps occurred during their most devastating conflicts. War drives their advancement at an exponential rate. What are you suggesting? Asked Chancellor Mordak, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Honored Chancellor, if we attempt to integrate Earth into the Empire, we face several unacceptable scenarios. If we succeed in conquering them, we gain a world populated by the most dangerous warriors in known space, who will spend every moment planning our destruction. If we fail to conquer them immediately, we face an enemy that will rapidly advance to match or exceed our technology while maintaining superior tactical doctrine and an inexplicable willingness to accept casualties. Zexathera paused, allowing her words to sink in before delivering her final assessment. Worst of all, if we attack them and they survive the initial assault, our intelligence suggests they will view it as justification for total war against all alien species. They have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But they also have another saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. Humans preparing for war against a galactic empire would represent an existential threat to every civilized species in known space. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds carried fear rather than excitement. Representatives from warrior cultures that had taken centuries to pacify began calculating what it would mean to face an enemy that could not be pacified. Chancellor Mordak raised his ceremonial staff, calling for order. Ambassador Zexathera, what do you recommend? Complete avoidance, honored Chancellor. We establish a quarantine zone encompassing their entire system. No ships, no probes, no contact of any kind. We classify all information about Earth at the highest security levels and ensure no one learns of their existence. You're suggesting we simply pretend they don't exist? I'm suggesting we leave them alone until they achieve interstellar capability on their own. Perhaps by then, they will have evolved beyond their current psychological patterns. Or perhaps they will have destroyed themselves, solving the problem naturally. And if they don't destroy themselves? If they eventually reach the stars while maintaining their current nature? Zexathara's tentacles writhed with an emotion that had no direct translation in most languages, but approximated despair mixed with resignation. Then the galaxy will learn why Ambassador Zexathara recommended we never wake sleeping monsters. Captain Drixmal of the Imperial Survey vessel. Eternal Conquest had always prided himself on following regulations. In his 2 centuries of service to the Galactic Empire, he had never once deviated from protocol, never questioned orders from high command, and certainly never ventured into restricted space. Today, however, desperation had driven him to consider the unthinkable. "Sir?" his navigation officer, Ensign Ithrak, announced with barely concealed nervousness. "We're approaching the edge of quarantine zone designation Omega-7. Captain Drixmal stared at the view screen displaying the invisible boundary that had been maintained for 57 years. Beyond that line lay the human star system. Earth's sun burning steadily in the void, completely oblivious to the debate its third planet had sparked across the galaxy. "Captain," his communications officer spoke up, "I'm still receiving distress signals from the merchant convoy. The Kretok pirates have disabled their engines and are moving in for the kill. Even at maximum warp, the nearest Imperial fleet won't reach them for 14 hours. Drixmal's mandibles clicked with frustration. The Eternal Conquest was perfectly positioned to intercept the pirates in less than 2 hours, but doing so would require cutting directly through the Forbidden System. The alternative meant watching 30,000 innocent civilians die while help remained tantalizingly close. "Sir," his tactical officer, Lieutenant Gorthek, added quietly, "the quarantine regulations specify no contact with the indigenous species. Technical passage through the system without stopping shouldn't violate the spirit of the restriction." Drixmal knew he was rationalizing, but the screams of terror from the convoy's final transmission haunted him. Children aboard those vessels would die if he chose protocol over action. "Navigation. Plot a course through the system's outer edge. Maximum stealth configuration. We'll transit as quickly as possible without detection." "Aye, sir," Ithrak responded, though his tone suggested he thought they were all making a terrible mistake. The Eternal Conquest slipped across the quarantine boundary like a shadow. At nearly 2 kilometers in length, the Imperial Dreadnought represented the pinnacle of galactic military engineering. Its stealth systems could render it invisible to any known sensor array, while its weapons could level continents. "Entering the human system now, Captain," Ithrak reported. "I'm detecting significant electromagnetic activity from the third planet, but their technology appears primitive as expected. No signs of detection." Drixmal relaxed slightly. The intelligence reports had been clear that humans possessed no advanced sensor systems. A quick passage through their outer system would go completely unnoticed. "Wait," the sensor operator, Chief Zelvan, suddenly called out. "I'm picking up multiple artificial objects throughout the system, far more than anticipated." "Elaborate, Chief." "Sir, there are thousands of artificial satellites in orbit around the third planet. And I'm detecting what appear to be installations on several moons and asteroids throughout the system." Captain Drixmal frowned. The reports from 57 years ago had described humans as barely capable of reaching their own moon. This level of system-wide infrastructure suggested massive advancement. "Are we certain these are human constructions?" he asked. "Analyzing now, sir," Zelvan replied, his instruments humming with activity. "Energy signatures are consistent with primitive fusion and chemical propulsion. Definitely indigenous technology, but far more extensive than our files indicated." "Time distortion effects from our transit?" suggested Lieutenant Gorthek. "Perhaps we've emerged further in their timeline than calculated." "Negative," Ithrak confirmed. "Chronometer readings are accurate. Only 57 years have passed since the original survey." Drixamal felt the first stirrings of unease. 57 years was barely an eye blink for most civilized species. The idea that humans had expanded from single-planet dwellers to system-wide presence in such a short time defied everything the Empire knew about technological development. "Captain," Zelvan called out with growing alarm, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the fourth planet. It appears to be completely covered in industrial installations." The view screen shifted to display Mars, or what had once been Mars. The red planet now gleamed with artificial lighting visible even from space. Massive orbital platforms ringed the world like mechanical moons. "That's impossible," Lieutenant Gorthek whispered. "Complete planetary industrialization requires thousands of years of development." "Sir," the communications officer announced, "I'm picking up massive amounts of electromagnetic chatter throughout the system. The humans appear to have established a comprehensive communications network linking every major installation." "Can you decode their transmissions?" "Working on it, sir. Their communication protocols are surprisingly sophisticated for their technology level, but our translation systems are adapting." Captain Drixmal stared at the transformed solar system surrounding him. This wasn't the primitive civilization described in Ambassador Zexathara's reports. This was a species in the midst of explosive expansion. "Sir!" Zelvan suddenly called out, his voice tight with worry. "I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with weapon systems. Multiple installations throughout the system appear to be armed." "Armed with what?" "Analyzing. Sir, these energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they've built, it's generating power levels comparable to our own weapon systems." "That's impossible," Gorthek protested. "Humans don't possess the technology for—" Alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in crimson as the Eternal Conquest's most advanced sensors detected something that shouldn't exist. "Captain!" Yithrak shouted over the noise. "We're being actively scanned! Something just painted us with targeting sensors." "From where?" I can't isolate the source, sir. The scanning beam appears to be coming from multiple locations simultaneously." Chief Zelvan's instruments worked frantically to process the incoming data. "Sir, whatever just scanned us utilized sensor technology I don't recognize. The resolution suggests they've mapped our entire ship down to the molecular level." Drixmal felt his courage drain away. Only the most advanced civilizations in the galactic core possessed sensors capable of such detailed analysis. "Stealth system status?" "Still active and functioning, sir. According to our instruments, we should be completely invisible." "Then how are they scanning us?" Before anyone could answer, the communications officer's equipment came alive with incoming signals. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect galactic standard." The bridge fell silent except for the background hum of failing stealth systems. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, then displayed the face of a human. Male, middle-aged by their standards, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. His eyes held an intelligence that made Drixmal's skin crawl. "Greetings, Captain Drixmal of the Imperial Survey Vessel, Eternal Conquest. I am Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Welcome to Sol System." Captain Drixmal's mandibles clicked uncontrollably. Not only had they detected his ship despite advanced stealth systems, they knew his name, his ship's designation, and they spoke his language fluently. "How do you know who you are?" Admiral Chen smiled, an expression that somehow seemed more threatening than reassuring. "Captain, we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know all about the Galactic Empire, and we're well aware of the quarantine your people placed on our system. Then you know that contact between our species is forbidden." "Forbidden by whom?" Chen's smile widened. "We never agreed to any quarantine. And you, Captain, have just violated your own regulations by entering our space." Drixmal realized with growing horror that the human was correct. By entering the system, even in transit, He had technically violated the quarantine from the Imperial side. "I demand safe passage through this system," he said, trying to project authority he no longer felt. "Demand?" Admiral Chen's eyebrows raised in apparent amusement. "Captain, you're currently surrounded by 47 Earth Defense Fleet vessels, all of which have weapons locked onto your position. You're in no position to demand anything." "Impossible," Lieutenant Gorthek whispered. "Our sensors would detect any ships in the immediate vicinity." Admiral Chen seemed to hear the comment. "Your sensors are designed to detect conventional drive signatures and energy emissions. Our ships utilize gravitational manipulation systems your science hasn't developed yet." As if summoned by his words, space around the Eternal Conquest began to shimmer. 47 sleek vessels materialized out of nowhere, their hulls reflecting starlight in ways that hurt to look at directly. "We've been expecting you," Admiral Chen continued conversationally. "Not you specifically, of course, but we knew someone would eventually test the quarantine. Galactic empires aren't known for respecting boundaries when they become inconvenient." "What do you want?" Captain Drixmal asked, his voice barely steady. "Want? Captain, we want what every species wants, the right to exist without interference, the freedom to develop at our own pace, the opportunity to explore the galaxy without someone else's permission. The quarantine exists for your protection as much as ours." Admiral Chen's expression darkened. "Protection? Captain, do you have any idea what your protection has cost us? 57 years of isolation. 57 years of knowing we share the galaxy with thousands of other species while being treated like a plague to be contained. The reports indicated your species was dangerously aggressive." "Aggressive?" Chen laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Captain, in the 57 years since your people decided we were too dangerous for contact, we've eliminated warfare from Earth entirely. We've colonized our entire solar system. We've developed technology your scientists would consider impossible. And we've done it all while knowing that somewhere out there, an entire galaxy considers us monsters." Captain Drixmal felt reality shifting around him. Everything he thought he knew about humans was proving wrong. "If you've achieved peace, then perhaps the quarantine can be reconsidered." "Peace?" Admiral Chen interrupted. "Captain, we didn't achieve peace despite our aggressive nature. We achieved peace by focusing that aggression outward. Every human alive knows that somewhere beyond the quarantine line, there's an empire that considers us too dangerous to exist. Do you have any idea how that knowledge affects a species' development?" The implications hit Drixmal like a physical blow. Instead of containing human aggression, the quarantine had given it focus and direction. "You've been preparing for war." "We've been preparing for contact," Chen corrected. "Whether that contact is peaceful or hostile depends entirely on the intentions of whoever makes it first. The Empire has no hostile intentions toward your species." "Really? Then why did your people recommend complete avoidance rather than diplomatic contact? Why establish a quarantine instead of attempting communication? Why treat us like a disease to be contained rather than neighbors to be met?" Drixmal had no answer. The decision had been made long before his time, based on reports he'd never been allowed to read. "Captain," Admiral Chen continued, "you have a choice to make. You can continue to your destination, rescue that merchant convoy, and report this encounter to your superiors. Or you can attempt to maintain the quarantine through force. You're threatening a ship of the Imperial Navy? I'm offering you the same choice you offered us 57 years ago: isolation or integration, peaceful coexistence or conflict." The bridge of the Eternal Conquest remained silent as Captain Drixmal wrestled with a decision that could reshape galactic politics. "And if I report this encounter? Then your empire will learn that the quarantine has failed, that humans are no longer contained to a single world, that we've spent over 5 decades preparing for the day when isolation was no longer possible. Admiral Chen leaned forward, his eyes boring into the camera. Your people were warned 57 years ago that Earth was off limits. That warning wasn't for your protection, Captain. It was for ours. Because the moment contact becomes inevitable, everything changes. Changes how? Admiral Chen's smile returned, but this time it carried a promise that made Captain Drixmal's blood run cold. You're about to find out. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Empire had never hosted an emergency session of this magnitude. Representatives from all member worlds crowded into the massive hall, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex maze of environmental zones and protection barriers. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as countless species waited for news that would determine the fate of their civilization. High Chancellor Mordak stood at the central podium, his aged exoskeleton clicking with nervous energy. In the 90 years since Ambassador Zexathera's original warning about Earth, he had overseen the longest period of peace in galactic history. The quarantine had held, the humans had remained contained, and the Empire had prospered. All of that was about to change. Honored delegates, his voice carried across the chamber's translation systems, I have received a report that will forever alter the course of galactic civilization. Captain Drixmal of the Eternal Conquest has made contact with the quarantined species. The chamber erupted in shocked voices, harmonic frequencies, and biochemical stress signals. The concept that someone had violated the most sacred restriction in Imperial law sent waves of panic through species that had built their security on the assumption that sleeping monsters would remain asleep. Order! Mordak's ceremonial staff struck the resonance chamber, sending vibrations that demanded attention from every species present. Captain Drixmal has returned with intelligence that requires immediate council action. A holographic display activated at the chamber's center, showing the familiar blue-green marble of Earth. But this time, the planet was surrounded by a complex network of space installations that gleamed like artificial stars. The quarantine zone no longer contains the human threat, Mordak announced. They have achieved system-wide presence and technological capabilities that exceed our previous assessments. Captain Drixmal materialized via holographic projection, his normally composed demeanor showing clear signs of psychological strain. The experienced officer had returned from Sol System a changed being, haunted by implications his military mind couldn't fully process. Honored Council, Drixmal began. The humans know about us. They have known about the Galactic Empire for decades. They have been monitoring our communications, studying our technology, and preparing for eventual contact. The chamber's environmental systems worked overtime to process the stress-related chemical emissions from thousands of terrified species. Furthermore, Drixmal continued, they have developed capabilities that should be impossible with their resource base and time frame. Their technological advancement rate defies every known model of civilization development. The holographic display shifted to show human vessels, sleek and deadly, utilizing drive systems that bent space around them in ways that made seasoned engineers question fundamental physics. They detected and tracked my vessel despite full stealth protocols. They knew my name, my ship's designation, and my mission parameters before I even realized I was being observed. Counselor Yithmar from the silicon-based Zerion Collective raised a crystalline appendage. Captain, are you suggesting they possess intelligence-gathering capabilities that penetrate our most secure communications? I'm stating it as fact, Counselor. They quoted Imperial regulations, referenced classified military protocols, and demonstrated detailed knowledge of our fleet movements throughout the outer territories. The implications sent another wave of panic through the assembly. If humans could monitor Imperial communications from a quarantined system, no military planning could be considered secure. What did they want? Asked Chancellor Mordak, though his tone suggested he dreaded the answer. Recognition, Captain Drixmail replied. They want the quarantine ended and formal diplomatic contact established. They consider their 57 years of isolation an injustice that must be corrected. And if we refuse? Captain Drixmail's mandibles clicked with barely suppressed fear. Admiral Chen made it clear that humans consider isolation and integration the only acceptable options. Continued quarantine is no longer possible. A new voice cut through the chamber's nervous chatter. Ambassador Zexathara, now ancient by her species' standards, had requested permission to address the council. Her once vibrant tentacles had darkened with age, but her intellect remained razor-sharp. "Honored Chancellor," she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent studying humanity's psychological patterns. "I warned this council 57 years ago that we should never wake sleeping monsters. It appears we have failed to maintain that sleep." "Ambassador," Mordak replied, "what do you recommend?" "I recommend we prepare for war," Zexathara said bluntly. "Not because humans have shown hostile intent, but because war may be the only outcome once the galaxy learns what they have become." She activated her own holographic display, showing intelligence reports that had been classified at the highest levels for decades. "We have been monitoring human electromagnetic emissions since the quarantine began. Their global communications network has revealed psychological and sociological developments that justify our worst fears." The display showed graphs tracking various human behavioral patterns over the past 57 years. Humans have not abandoned their aggressive nature during isolation. They have redirected it. Every advance in their technology has military applications. Every peaceful development has been accompanied by corresponding weapons research. Images flashed across the display, showing human military installations throughout their solar system. Asteroid fortresses, orbital weapon platforms, and defensive networks that turned their entire star system into an impregnable fortress. "More concerning," Zexathara continued, "is their psychological adaptation to the quarantine. Instead of viewing it as protection, they perceive it as imprisonment. They have developed a cultural narrative that positions the Galactic Empire as an external threat that must eventually be confronted." "What kind of threat assessment are we looking at?" asked Fleet Admiral Corex, representing the Empire's military command. "Admiral, in 57 years, humans have transformed from a single-planet species to a system-spanning civilization with technology that rivals our own in several key areas. Their rate of advancement suggests they will achieve technological parity with the Empire within the next 20 years. "Impossible," Admiral Corex protested. "The Empire's technology represents 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge from thousands of species." "Admiral," Zexathara replied coldly, "humans don't accumulate knowledge gradually like most species. They innovate exponentially when faced with existential pressure. The quarantine has provided that pressure for 57 years. Captain Drixmail stepped forward. "Admiral Chen showed me technical specifications for their defensive systems. Their energy weapons utilize principles our scientists haven't discovered. Their starships employ gravitational manipulation that makes our fastest vessels look primitive." "You're suggesting they've surpassed us technologically?" Admiral Corex's tone carried disbelief. "I'm suggesting they've developed along completely different lines," Drixmail clarified. "Where we achieved efficiency through refinement, they achieved breakthroughs through desperation." Ambassador Zexathara nodded grimly. "Humans under pressure don't just adapt, they evolve. 57 years of knowing they were considered too dangerous for contact has pushed their entire species into permanent war footing. Then we destroy them before they become too powerful," Admiral Corex declared. "A preemptive strike while we still maintain superior numbers." The chamber fell silent. The suggestion of genocide sent shockwaves through species that had joined the Empire seeking peace and prosperity. "Admiral," Chancellor Mordak said carefully, "such action, would violate every principle upon which the Empire was founded. So would allowing a species of warrior scientists to develop uncontrolled until they threaten galactic stability, Corex replied. There's another problem, Captain Drixmal interjected. They're no longer confined to their system. The chamber erupted again as this new revelation sent fresh waves of panic through the assembly. Explain, Mordak demanded. Admiral Chen mentioned human exploration fleets operating beyond Sol system. When I asked for clarification, he smiled and said humans had been checking on the neighbors for the past 15 years. Ambassador Zex Thara's tentacles writhed with an emotion that approximated horrified resignation. They've been conducting reconnaissance missions beyond the quarantine zone, which means they know the locations of our border worlds, Admiral Corex said, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. It means they know the locations of all our worlds, Zex Thara corrected. If they've been monitoring our communications for decades, they possess complete intelligence on Imperial infrastructure. What do they want? Counselor Drexnull from the Peaceful Harmony Worlds asked desperately. Captain Drixmal activated a recording from his encounter with Admiral Chen. The human's face appeared in the holographic display, still wearing that unsettling smile that suggested knowledge of secrets better left unspoken. We want what every species wants. Chen's recorded voice filled the chamber. The right to exist without interference, the freedom to develop at our own pace, the opportunity to explore the galaxy without someone else's permission. And if we grant these requests, Chancellor Mordak asked the recording, then perhaps we can build something better than an empire, Chen replied. Perhaps we can build a true galactic community where species interact as equals rather than subjects. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in contemplative silence. He's suggesting the dissolution of imperial authority, Admiral Corex said finally. He's suggesting evolution beyond imperial authority, Ambassador Zexathera corrected. Humans don't think in terms of conquest and submission. They think in terms of competition and cooperation. To them, the Empire represents an outdated model of civilization. What do they propose instead? Unknown, Zexathara admitted. But based on their psychological patterns, they likely envision a loose confederation of independent species united by mutual benefit, rather than centralized control. That's impossible, protested Counselor Vekthal from the ancient core worlds. Galactic civilization requires structure, hierarchy, and central authority. According to human political theory, Captain Drixmal said quietly, excessive central authority inevitably leads to rebellion or stagnation. They believe distributed power structures are more stable and innovative. Chancellor Mordak stood silent for several moments, weighing options that could determine whether the galaxy experienced evolution or catastrophe. What happens if we refuse contact? He asked finally. Ambassador Zexathera's response chilled every being in the chamber. Then we discover whether 57 years of preparation was enough to make humanity stronger than an empire of 10,000 worlds. And if we accept contact, then we discover whether the galaxy is ready for neighbors who refuse to be conquered, dominated, or controlled. Chancellor Mordak looked out over the assembly of species that had built their civilization on the assumption of perpetual expansion and inevitable dominance. It appears, he said slowly, that the humans were right about one thing. Everything is about to change. Admiral Chen's final words echoed through the chamber as delegates realized that the age of the Galactic Empire as they knew it was ending, whether they chose cooperation or conflict. Welcome to the future, gentlemen. We hope you're ready for it. The vote to end the quarantine passed by a margin of 3 votes. Humanity was about to be introduced to galactic civilization, and galactic civilization was about to discover what happens when sleeping monsters wake up friendly but unwilling to go back to sleep. The galaxy would never be the same.